Today on Sports Central, we go over our next team projection of the soft season, and it's going to be over the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, a team that went 10-2 overall in the 2020 season, and a great season for Notre Dame as they made it to the college football playoff as well. So obviously for Notre Dame being a team that was a national contender in 2020, it was a great season for them. But how will they be in 2021 is what we're going over here today. We're going to go over a few players that Notre Dame will be losing, who they'll be returning, and also look at their schedule for the first time this offseason, starting out with the previous 6 games for Notre Dame. And this team obviously was in the ACC last season. It looks like it might have been the one season where we'd see Notre Dame in an actual conference. As you may know, or as you obviously know, Notre Dame has been an independent for quite a long time, and it looks like they're going to be back to being an independent in 2021. This team was in the ACC in 2020, which, if you ask me personally, I feel like Notre Dame would be a better fit in the ACC. Like, this is a national contending team most seasons, so really for Notre Dame here, like, this is a team that should be in a conference. But good thing is for Notre Dame, their strength of schedule in 2021 is actually very high. Like, this team has got several really tough opponents, so they should be just fine strength of schedule wise for next season, still being an independent. But there are some seasons where Notre Dame, I feel like, it's almost overrated just because of one, because of the name, but of two, because of their weak strength of schedule, which once again is not the case for 2021. This team does have a pretty tough schedule next year, but I'm just stating, like, hypothetically, this team should be in a conference, I really do think. But anyway, looking at the previous 6 games for Notre Dame, this team beat Clemson 47-40. That was a signature win for this team, definitely the biggest win of the season. I mean, that was quite a sight when Notre Dame pulled the upset there. They beat Boston College 45-31, beat North Carolina, big win there on the road, 31-17, and they beat Syracuse 45-21. Once this team got to the postseason, it was a different story. They had 2 very tough matchups against Clemson in the ACC championship game, lost to them 10-34, and lost to Alabama in the college football playoff semifinal 14-31, which obviously Crimson Tide were an outstanding team last season. So, I mean, considering you just came off of a tough loss to Clemson, it just was a tough end to the season for Notre Dame. But first 6 games, this team was 6-0. They were actually undefeated for quite a while, or I'd say for the entire regular season, as this team was 10-0, of course. But they were 4-2 in the last 6 games as well. So for Notre Dame, once again, outstanding season, no doubt about that. Looking at your roster preview going into next season, you lose your starting quarterback, Ian Book. Feels like he's been with Notre Dame for forever. But yeah, he has, of course, 2,800 yards on the 2020 season, 15 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Great season for Ian Book. He was a big reason why I think this Notre Dame team was so successful in 2020. Also put up a 65% completion rate, so great season for him. Jack Cohn is transferring in from Wisconsin. That is going to be a big storyline there for Notre Dame going into next season. Jack Cohn, of course, was an outstanding quarterback for Wisconsin. He was injured for 2020, so he did not play last season, but I really do think if Jack Cohn was healthy going into 2020, Wisconsin could have easily been a national contender last season with Jack Cohn. So yeah, if Jack Cohn comes back from his injury stronger, that's going to be huge for Notre Dame because they've got a great quarterback with him. Kyron Williams is coming back. That is a huge return there. He put up just right around 1,500 yards and 14 touchdowns last year. Chris Tyree is also coming back. He put up just right around 600 yards on last season. Javon McKinley is the top wide receiver for this team for 2020. He will not be returning for 2021. Looking at him last year, he put up some outstanding stats with over 700 yards and 3 touchdowns. And then, of course, you return your tight end, Michael Mayer. That's going to be a big return there. Of course, I mean, he was an outstanding tight end, definitely one of the best, I'd say, in the ECC last year, putting up just over 450 yards and 2 touchdowns. You do lose your second wide receiver as well, so you lose your top 2 wide receivers there. You do return your third in Avery Davis, so it looks like your top receivers next season, yardage-wise, will probably be Avery Davis and Michael Mayer. But yeah, it is going to be tough losing McKinley and your second wide receiver there. They do lose 4 offensive linemen too. Do not sleep on that. That's going to be pretty tough going into next season. This team will be pretty inexperienced at the offensive line position, especially at the start of next season. You also lose 1 defensive lineman, 2 linebackers, and 2 in the secondary. So you lose 5 on the defensive side. The thing is for Notre Dame here is this team has got quite a bit of depth. Like, this team is definitely losing quite a bit, but they've got a lot of depth. Like, if you look at this team from 2019 to 2020, I actually said last offseason, I mean, Notre Dame, this team was losing a ton of production last offseason, which was very concerning to me. But this team obviously fared just fine because they made it to the college football playoff. But Notre Dame, I mean, this team, considering they did as well as they did in 2020, considering how much they lost production-wise from 2019 to 2020, this team should be just fine, especially if Jack Cohn plays well and is healthy. Like, Jack Cohn is going to have a huge influence on this team. If he plays well, this team is going to play well, is what I will say. Will the Irish be a national contender, though? That's the main question here. I mean, I think Notre Dame definitely, it really depends on how they do in the first few games, I think. Like, having a different quarterback under center could be an adjustment there, or will be an adjustment. It's just a matter of how well that they do with it. But will the Irish be a national contender? I do think this team will be ranked for the majority of next season. I'm not sure if they're going to be a national contender, but I definitely think this team has got potential to be up there with one of the best teams in the nation. But looking at your schedule going into next season, you start the season with Florida State on the road. Should be a fun matchup there. Then you got Toledo and Purdue. Toledo and Purdue should both be wins, I'd say. Wisconsin, that is going to be a fun game in Soldier Field, because if you think about it here, Wisconsin, Jack Cohn, of course, he used to play for Wisconsin. So basically, we're going to see Jack Cohn versus his former team on September 25th. That is definitely one of the most intriguing matchups so far from what I've seen in these previews. Notre Dame, Wisconsin, that's going to be quite a matchup there. In Chicago. Then you got Cincinnati. That's going to be an interesting one. Virginia Tech on the road as well. You got USC, North Carolina, Navy, Virginia, Georgia Tech, and Stanford. So actually, this team has got a few tough games in here. Like Cincinnati, that's going to be a tough matchup. Wisconsin's going to be tough. Florida State on the road maybe could be. USC is always a close matchup. North Carolina. So really, this team doesn't have that easy of a schedule. Like, usually for Notre Dame being an independent, this team usually has an easier schedule than some. But, you got to play Cincinnati. That's probably the toughest opponent on your schedule. North Carolina, they're going to be really good. North Carolina, don't sleep on them. Wisconsin, USC. Who else we got? Virginia Tech possibly. So, you got five opponents that will be pretty tough. So, but anyway, looking at the first half of your schedule, I think you'll have a close one against Florida State there. I'd probably favor Notre Dame in that one right now, but I'm going to put that as a yellow game. Toledo, Purdue are both going to be easy wins with them being at home, and also the teams are pretty terrible. Wisconsin's going to be close, Cincinnati's going to be close, and Virginia Tech's also going to be close. So I've got 4 yellow games for you in your first half. I do think Notre Dame should have 4 to 5 wins, though, at least in the first 6 games. Like, I wouldn't even be surprised if this team was 6-0 through the first half of the season. But you'll at least have, I'd say, 5 wins through those first 6 games for sure. Looking at the second half of your schedule, though, of course, USC, that's going to be a close one. North Carolina, also going to be a close game. Should be fun to see who wins, especially between Notre Dame and North Carolina. North Carolina's looking really good with Sam Howell. That is going to be a fun team to watch next season. Navy, that's going to be a win. Virginia on the road. I'm going to put that as a yellow game for now just because it's on the road. And then, of course, you got Georgia Tech and Stanford. Both games will be easy wins. So I've got you with 5 guaranteed wins going into next season and no guaranteed losses. So that is always a good sight. Your ceiling is going to be 11-1 for next season, which is a good ceiling. I really do think. Like 11-1, that puts you in a really good position. The reason why I couldn't put the ceiling at 12-0 for Notre Dame is just because of the adjustments this team will be making going into next season. I could easily see this team at 11 wins next season. Like, 11 wins is definitely reasonable for Notre Dame, but 12 wins, I just don't think, with having Cincinnati, USC, North Carolina, Wisconsin, all of those games, I think Notre Dame's going to slip up at some point this season. I think they're going to take one loss, or they're at least one loss. I think this team definitely is going to be on the high end for wins. Like, once again, your projection is going to be 10-2, so I'm expecting 10 wins out of Notre Dame next season. But I just feel like this team will slip up at some point, so you will be taking at least one loss, 1 to 2 losses for next year. That is not terrible at all. That puts you in a really good bowl game. So once again, the ceiling is 11-1, projection 10-2. Floor is going to be 8-4 for Notre Dame next season. So the floor being the worst that you possibly can be. Anyway, that being said, that wraps up my projections on Notre Dame for next season. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on the Irish. If you like this video, please slap a like on it, subscribe as well as it helps to the channel. I really appreciate that. Once again, thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll see you guys all later.